WNST, Chicago often enough, and the Ravens don't play in Chicago often enough for me to have this guy on. I don't know where to begin. Like, if I read his resume, it's one of the more impressive, lengthier resumes. But more than that, at the top of his resume, it says, "We were once colleagues and still friends. 20 years ago, I worked at Sporting News Radio 101 Sports. This guy was a Chicago, truly a legend, a giant, topic on sports, heard all over the Midwest. He is my longtime friend and former columnist at the Chicago Sun-Times, doing all sorts of things in all sorts of ways. But the king of Chicago sports, we welcome Chet Kopic back onto the program. Chet, I love you, man. I don't get to talk to you often enough. What's going on, man?
Nancy, my brother, you are hired. I will give my eulogy. A eulogy.
Well,
it has a minimum of 5,000 words.
Well, I would, I'd probably make you sound better than you were because I like you more than everybody else does. Hey, man.
How you been, my man?
I'm good. The White Sox and the Orioles, obviously, we're not going to sit here and talk for 20 minutes about the White Sox, right? I mean, they're a mess right now, and off the back end of the trade for sale for Moncada in the offseason, they're not going anywhere this year. The Orioles are probably not going anywhere, but we need to make sure for sure after the weekend at Yankee Stadium.
You know, what's interesting, Nancy, is this. The Cubs go through, the Titanic rebuild beginning in 2012 when they hire Dale Swaim. 12, 13, they blow 200 ball games. 14, they go nowhere. 15 is the arrival. 16, the victory party. The White Sox are having a very, very difficult time. Number one, this is now, always has been during my lifetime, a Cubs town. And by the way, your note about the O's of the White Sox, I miss the halcyon days when Brooksy, Boog Powell, Cal Ripken, Mark Belanger, Paul Blair were coming into Chicago 3 times a year. I think it's really unfortunate that those rivalries have dissipated. But the White Sox right now are essentially nasty and non-story here in Chicago. I got to be frank with you, and I'm somewhat embarrassed to say this. I don't read about the White Sox online. I don't read their stories in either the Trip of the Sun-Times. Everything in the Sun right now is about 2 particular items. You know, the Cubs, the ups and downs. The victory party nasty went way too long, as you know. All the way through the ring ceremony, the banner ceremony. People thought the Cubs would cruise this year. They're in the Skid Row division in the National League Central. But the victory party went along just too far. And right now, they only have 3/5 of a rotation. They have got to be major players before July 31.
Well, I mean, how important is it that they win the World Series again this year, right? I mean, I saw.
No, I don't think it's important at all.
Look, I saw The Hangover, right? I was out in Arizona for the owners' meetings in March, and on a Sunday afternoon, I went out to that palace that they built at the edge of Phoenix for the baseball team. 24,000 seats. You couldn't get in. They're scalping tickets for $75 to sit in the bleachers for a meaningless spring training game. T-shirts over here, hats over there. We've had a couple of parades here, Chet, on the football side, and there is a hangover after that, and especially for the Cubs, where it wasn't 3 or 4 years of trying hard and getting their brains beaten in like maybe it has been for, let's say, the Nationals or some other teams that have been trying to get up the mountain and haven't gotten there. The Cubs, saw the mountain, were the king of the mountain, and I don't know that this hangover couldn't have been predicted, right, if you were smart.
Well, I think you're right on target. Let me give you a couple of reasons why. Number one, Addison Russell, teams now know how to pitch him. Kyle Schwarber, teams now know how to pitch him. To a lesser degree, Anthony Rizzo, even though he's a 2015 National League MVP. Pitchers have determined how you can go about dealing with Anthony Rizzo. But again, Nancy, the big thing is this. Their bullpen is very, very suspect. They have 3/5 of a starting rotation. They sorely missed the first half Jason Hamill gave them last year. I'll tell you what. Let's you and I play trade.
Sure.
If you've got a quality pitcher, a guy who would fill a 2 or 3 spot in my rotation with the Chicago Cubs, I'll give you Kyle Schwarber and a prospect. You go.
How about if I give you Jake Arrieta for a bag of baseballs and you win a World Series with him, Chet? How about that?
Well, how about Scotty Boras talking about Max Scherzer type money, 200 large, for a guy who yesterday was staked to a 4-0 lead in the first inning and couldn't get out of the fourth inning.
Yeah, I mean, what has happened with Arrieta there that your eyes have seen? Because, look, we saw the bad Jake Arrieta for a number of years here. I mean, it's how he wound up out there. But I also saw this guy grow a beard out there and take on this sort of Al Rabowski pose of toughness and the stare down and the glare down. And there was an intimidation, around Arrieta 2 seasons ago, if not in the last year, that feels like it's missing right now, right?
Well, Nancy, I hate pitch counts. And I hate this notion that if you pitch 200 innings, your arm is going to fall out. But during the times that Jake was in Baltimore, he never threw more than 155 innings. He's thrown 600 innings plus over the last 3 years. I just don't think his arm was ready for it. That being said, pitching is a lot about swagger. Pitching is a lot about attitude, about presence. When Jake would walk to the mound in 2015, you thought you were looking at Bob Gibson. You thought you were looking at Mariano Rivera. You thought you were looking at David Wells, if you will. That swagger is gone. This guy right now is just another pitcher. He's just another arm. And, John Lester has his good moments, has his moments when he's not particularly effective. So, again, here's the thing. Again, I go back to one point, Nasty. The Cubs will probably win the division with a record that'll be good, but nothing sparkling. Certainly not going to be 103 wins like last year. They'll win about 86, 87 ball games, and they'll sneak in ahead of the Brewers. And the Cardinals right now look like a team in disarray. They cut Johnny Peralta. They fired their third base coach.
We got them this weekend, by the way. We can up the Cubbies out a little bit this weekend. We play the Cards. So it is weird times. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you about the Cubs. We're playing the White Sox, and then we get the Cardinals. But it is a small world after all, right, Chet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nasty, I was thinking about something. I still have my copy. In fact, I'm looking at it right now on my bookshelf of Purple Rain.
Oh, come on.
I still remember being in Ray James Stadium that night when the Raven defense led by Ray Lewis. And by the way, I got to tell you about a very special moment that I've never told you about, and shame on me for not doing this.
Let me get a drink of water. I want to hear this.
I MC Bo Jackson's golf tournament every year. And every year, Eddie George comes in to the tournament, and Ray Lewis generally comes in to the tournament. I'm interviewing the two of them together about 3 years ago, and Eddie George starts going into a riff, a really heavy riff about Ray Lewis, and declares him the greatest linebacker in National Football League history. Now, my wheels start to turn. I've seen Nitschke, I've seen Buckness, I've seen Singletary, I've seen Urlacher, I've seen some pretty darn good linebackers come through this town. But I will say this much, inch for inch, pound for pound, greatest MLB I have ever seen on the National Football League level. In his prime, there was nobody like Ray Lewis.
Well, we're going to find that a year, this time next summer, it'll be Hall of Fame induction time in Canton, and people are already hitting me up. Hey, you're running buses to Canton next year for Ray Lewis. I'm just trying to be alive this time next year, keep us out of trouble. I'm just trying to, take 3 out of 4 from the White Sox this week, Chet. He is Chet Kopic.
That shouldn't be the toughest assignment in the world.
He's out Chicago. Of course, a legend out there. When did you get your start out there? I mean, I see you post pictures, and I know you've been nostalgic about the stuff that you've done in professional wrestling and all the 80s and the Bears stuff, but I don't know how far back you go. When did you start in the city of Chicago?
Well, Nasty, I began at WFLD-TV, Channel 32, when UHF was so embryonic, only about 15 people in town had UHF. But they hired me as a production assistant. They didn't have a sports reporter. And lo and behold, Red Grange, the immortal Red Grange, came in December of '68 to pump the 100th meeting between the Bears and the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, December of '68, 1968?
Yeah.
I was born in October of '68, Chet, so I just want to put this into perspective, okay?
The news director walked in and said, what are we going to do? And Don Cannon, the news anchor, said, send Kopic out. The worst he can do is screw it up. Well, I went out and I did it, and it was fairly good. So I became I became a sports reporter. And then in 71, when I was 22, I produced the Milwaukee Bucks radio network the year they won the NBA title with
Kareem?
a very young Ferdinand Lewis Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Oscar. And then came back to Chicago, and lo and behold, a year and a half later, I'm doing the roller derby on national television, and I decided I wanted to be legit, so I went to Indianapolis.
No, hold on for a second here. You're not just going to say, so I just did some roller derby and move on from that. I have to stop you there on the roller derby. How did roller derby find you, Chet?
Well, it was kind of funny because I'm staff announcing at WFLD, and roller derby had a wonderful voice named Walt Harris. Walt was a TV director out in the Bay Area for Jerry Seltzer, the son of Leo Seltzer, who was the founder of the roller derby. And Leo also built the old Chicago Coliseum here in the Windy City. And Dick Miller and Jerry Fields, God bless him, said, you know what? We got this young guy here, Kopic. We know he likes the roller derby. He's pretty facile. He's pretty sharp. We think if you give him a chance, he can do it. Well, Nasty, I wound up doing the derby for about 2.5 years. I became their advance man. And I mean, that would mean, for example, on a Monday, you fly to St. Louis, you go to Joplin, you go to Carbondale, you go to Columbia, you come back on Friday night, you're doing a game.
Yeah, I bet you know every diner in Carbondale and Joplin and
I know every
Peoria.
Every there is to know in Columbia.
You've been to Peoria plenty too, right?
You know, hanging out with Ann Calvello and Joan Weston and Charlie O'Connell. And, you know, Nasty, you're young, you're keeping your bills in a sock, and I'm making, you know, pretty good money for a kid that age. In 1972, 73, I made about $40,000, which at that time was a lot of money. And, you know, it was a ball. But I also knew this. It couldn't go on forever. Or, you know, it's like being in a spin cycle. You're the guy in the middle of the microphone, and you're hyping the skaters. It's like years later, I became a ring announcer for Vince McMahon in the WWE here in Chicago, and I did WrestleMania 2. Vince wanted to hire me as a television announcer. And I really gave it a lot of serious thought because deep down inside, Nancy, as you know, I'm a mark. I get a great kick out of professional wrestling, albeit the wrestling that is on TV today with Raw I find to be almost atrocious.
You're kayfabe. I mean, you are. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, no doubt. I am purely kayfabe.
Absolutely.
A pure kayfabe. But, you know, I didn't take it, and the reason why is this. You become a wrestling announcer, back to my spin cycle analogy, you're in the middle, you're the Tux, and the Ultimate Warrior, and the Hulkster, and the Steamboat, and the Superfly, and the Masked Man, and Bray Wyatt, and these guys are all...
And the Bruiser and the Crusher. Right, exactly.
Yeah. I used to work for Dick the Bruiser. I used to be his advance man for wrestling shows at the amphitheater here in Chicago. And I've always had a fondness for professional wrestlers. In fact, I've always believed that wrestling is real nasty. And to quote the late, great Frank DeFord, it's life is fixed.
He is Chet Kopic out on Twitter and Chester W. Kopic out on Facebook. You're also doing some stuff out on LinkedIn. You're writing out on LinkedIn all the time, right?
I'm having a ball. You know what, Nancy? I determined that LinkedIn could be a very engaging platform for me to just freelance write. You know, I've got my 4th book coming out in the fall about Mama's boy Otis, one of a kind. The ladies all love him for his body and his mind. Otis Wilson, who along with Wilbur Marshall, I believe to be the best outside linebacker combo in National Football League history. Otis is a great story. Nasty, you'll love this. Now, dig this. He's raised in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which was primarily Jewish until after World War II when the African-American migration began. People who lived either in Otis's building or on his block. Now, dig this. World Be Free, Bernard King, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Riddick Bowe, and a young guy by the name of Mike Tyson, all in Otis's building or on Otis's block.
Wow. You're writing a book about him. That comes out in the fall, right?
It'll be out in November, and you will get the first complimentary copy because let me tell you, during the time I worked at Sporting News Radio, there was one talent that I admired, There was one guy who I thought, you know what, this guy gets it because he's conversational. He's speaking to the fan. He knows he's hip. He knows he's sharp. He's not afraid to walk the walk, but he talks the talk. And my good brother, that was you.
That's very sweet of you, Chet, man. I appreciate you coming out to our tailgate that we had out there a couple years ago. We threw a little bar party before the Ravens-Bears game.
I love your wife, and I'm so thrilled about her success and the bravery that the two of you have shown, and the courage that you have shown is really it's a guiding light for all of us. And Nasty, really, I would like to do this with you more often because every time I talk with you, I have a smile on my face, and my day is just a little bit more brighter.
Hey, dude, I appreciate it. That's very, very sweet of you, Chet. All right, man. Look, I called you to talk White Sox. We wound up talking Cubs. Can I just ask you about the Blackhawks? Because,
Sure.
On the Capitals side, it was very, very difficult to watch the Pittsburgh Penguins do this. I'm sure on the Chicago side, where you've had a couple of parades, and they have been sort of the shining light before the Cubs came along last year of winning around there. The Blackhawks turned things around there. I'm releasing the Peter principles this summer, Chet, as you know. My chronicles with Peter Giangelos and miserly ownership and pocketing money and all this sort of goofy old world ideology. The Blackhawks are the story that I want the Orioles to be. I want these two dunderhead kids of Angelos's to actually not be dunderheads, to give me my press pass back, to run the franchise the right way, and to win championships around here. The Blackhawks actually did that in Chicago, right?
Well, you know what, Nancy? It's probably the greatest 21st century story in sports. The Blackhawks were so far down, they were rated by one magazine, I believe it may have been SI, as the worst sports franchise in America. Now they're about the third or fourth best. Their season ticket waiting list is 300 miles long. They've won 3 Stanley Cups here during the salary cap era. It's a credit to Stan Bowman, the son of Scotty, their general manager, that he has been able to juggle talent. I mean, Nasty, in 2013, you remember the 17 seconds against the Boston Bruins when Brian Bickle and Dave Bolin scored those 2 goals. Bolin scores that goal. 6 days later, he's not with the club. He's a salary cap casualty. They lost Bufflin, they lost Saab, they lost Ladd. I could go on and on with players, Andrew Shaw, that they've lost. But, don't anybody discount these guys. Kane and Taves both had difficult playoffs. Nashville, for 4 given games against the Blackhawks, played superlative hockey.
They did for a month and a half, honestly.
I can give you an hour. I can give you an hour about how much I don't like Sidney Crosby.
Well, next time we get together, I want you to give me an hour on hating Sidney Crosby. My audience would eat that up with a spoon. I promise you. Hey, man, always good to visit with you. I know your time is short. I appreciate you making some time. I'm sorry I'm not accompanying the team out to the South Side. You do know my last name's on the wall on the South Side. There's a statue out in center field of Little Louie. So, my heart's always on the South Side. So it's a struggle for me to watch the Cubs do well, Chet.
You know what, Nasty? What's really embarrassing is this. I saw Little Louie play for the first time in 1957.
That makes you a young old-timer, Chet Kopic.
You got it, my brother. Nasty, take good care. My best to your wife, and go Ravens.
We're going to send everybody out to follow you. Chet Kopic out on Twitter. The book on Otis Wilson comes out in October, and you might want to Google that up and Google up Chet Kopic. If you're out on LinkedIn, give him a follow there. He does a lot of writing there, and he's also my Facebook friend. And for 25 years, Chet Kopic and I have been friends. And if I had to have, remember Charlie Ekman and John Stedman had an all-time character, the Character Bowl. They used to have it. Bud Paulino's up in Highlandtown. Chet Kopic would be totally in my top 10 of all-time characters, and a guy with character as well and integrity. That's why I love Chet. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day. I am lispy and wispy. I bit a hole in my tongue on Friday at Riley's Oyster in Federal Hill, eating a Brussels sprout. I've done a lot of stupid things, as I'm sure you're all aware of. This is right up there on the upper echelon of stupidity, I assure you. You can find me out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and anywhere the internet is served. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.